Hi, good evening. My name is Jay Rothman. I am the host of the show. Welcome to Real Men, Real Talk, Live. Welcome back. Welcome back to the studio. My name is Jay. Again, I've got my co-hosts all here with me this evening. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been live. Life has been in session, and let me tell you, it's been moving quick. But in a moment, more importantly, I've got Kamalu sitting side by side, and tonight coming out of Sedona with me, we have Chris Morrison joining us, as you've all known him in season 4, and we have a special guest tonight, Kristy Scher, founder The Way of the Adored Woman. Kristy, welcome to Real Men Real Talk Live. You are the first female co-host, special guest in season 4, so you hold that honor of joining us tonight. And welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am deeply honored. Thank you. Nice to be here.
I want to invite our guests, viewers that are listening, if you should hear something that you like or love, please feel free to drop it in a comment section. Also, if you have any questions for any one of us that come through tonight's topic, at any time, please feel free to drop the questions in your comment section, and we will absolutely do our best to answer as many questions as possible that come through. Tonight's episode is 199, and the topic is deeply satisfying relationships. And what I typically do when we have a female guest join us as a special appearance, and any guest, actually, I invite them to pick the topic if they have one that's burning within their own body temple. And so we did the same with Kristy. I said, what's on your mind for the topic that you'd like to come in on? And so I'm curious, Kristy, why deeply satisfying relationships was the one that came through for you, and what does that mean for you as we dive into tonight's show?
For me, relationships, how to have good relationships is the only conversation I really have ever wanted to have. It's the conversation I can't not have. And I think it's something that many people find painful or challenging, having relationships. And why I wanted to talk about having deeply satisfying relationships is that unless we know something is possible, we won't actually reach toward it or move toward it. We have to know that deeply satisfying, sustainably satisfying relationships are possible in order to be able to cultivate those, draw them into our lives. So I wanted to sort of set this as like an idea, a longing, a calling that is possible for people to have.
Beautiful. I like that. I do hear some feedback coming in. I'm not sure who's tapping, but it sounds like a tapping noise. Also, Chris, you were introduced, you met Kristy not that long ago at an event. And when you came back from that event, you had shared very briefly, without getting into the minutiae of it, that there was something that she had shared, some takeaways from the work she shared at the event you were at. And so I want to invite you to share, taking it right out of the gate. What was it that you heard Kristy share around you're meeting her, probably around this topic that had you introducing her to me to have her on the show tonight?
Yeah. So while we're at this retreat, we kind of gave like a keynote speech, right? And each one of us got to create and then give a speech. And the thing that I heard, and Kristy voiced it the most pointedly, was, Chris, you've got a lot of heart, and you're a really smart person, and we really love what you're doing. But where's your balls at in this? Like where are you stepping into the world and saying, I want to change the world in this way? And stepping, like, so much of my life has been around creating space for other people, um, trying to find consensus. And up until that point with her, it was a pivotal point for me where I was like, oh, right. I had the thing in the beginning of the year with Gabby that was like, oh, my worth isn't based upon what I provide for others. And the moment that I had with Kristy is I can actually have my own desires. I can want to be, I can want to have peace in my home. I can want to have a certain, 6-figure income. I can want to have, and these don't detract from anyone else in my life. These don't take away from anyone. These actually give me the ability to give me the things to create for. And so it was just a really, really pivotal deal to step into, being in alignment with my entire being, head, heart, root, and create from there rather than just being, I spent most of my time most of my life in my head. And this last year and a half have been, completely led through my heart. And now finding a way to create that alignment and step fully into that. So that was the, it was just a really, really and it shook me up for a couple weeks to sit there and go, what do I want? I have no idea what I want. And to now, be farther along that process and have a list of these are the things that I want in my life. And to not feel shame that I want to have certain aspects of my relationship, that I want to have, certain, things in my work that I do. So,
Kristy, what are you hearing? What are your takeaways from what you shared?
I mean, I just adore Chris. And I remember that moment really clearly. We were sort of given this assignment, like if you had 8 minutes to talk to the 8 billion people on the planet, what would you want them to know? And I heard Chris get up and really talk about his life and what he wanted to see in the world. And he and I think we share something, which is that we've both experienced a lot of suffering, and that has been the thing from which we have created our work. I think we both have a strong desire to see that other people don't suffer the way that we have. And what I saw in him was Chris, I hope it's okay to say this. I saw a certain hesitancy that I totally could relate to. And I just have to say I would never actually use the word balls. That's a very guy word. I actually used a different word altogether, which I don't need to say. But what I said to him was, I hear what you are creating and I hear the potency of it, but I don't actually feel in your words that you know the potency of what it is you both want and want to see in the world. And, I've spoken elsewhere about that it's incredibly important that good men know how to penetrate the world, that good men know how to benevolently impose their will on their world. And when a man does that from a place of emotional and spiritual alignment, he actually creates freedom for other people. And so basically I was saying, Chris, like I feel your heart and I know like you got all of this, like you've done the thought on this, you have the heart. Now, like, could you bring your root? I used a different word, but could you also get your root involved so that you could move, like push yourself into the world in a way where people could really feel the power of what you do? And it was risky, like to say that to somebody I don't know that well felt really risky. And it's actually one of the ways that I love people is to tell them the power that I see in them.
How was that for you to receive that, Chris? Then and now.
It's fascinating. It's just really fascinating to have the like such a clear understanding. And I'm still I still am struggling with it, right? It's still like I think that there's just that internal sale for me stepping in and just being like, this can change anyone it comes in contact with, and fully grasping a hold of that and stepping fully into that is still something that I'm in transition to. And I think it has to do with a lot of just the circumstances of where I'm at in my life, all of the things that are going on. I just got a heavy life right now, and to try to figure out how do I interweave this space that I want to step into has been very, very humbling, to say at least, right? With all the added aspects that have happened over the last couple of weeks, taking the boys on full time, all of that stuff. It's just been, how do I now? Yeah, that's that's just pulling away from, where I would really like to be with that. So,
Carmelo, I'm curious, what do you make of, you've been sitting here as an active listener for about 12 minutes into tonight's program. I'm curious, what are you making of what you've heard so far? What are your takeaways?
Well, what I'm hearing in this story is that there's something that Chris shared that really resonated with Kristy, that she felt like could have a major impact positively on a lot of people's lives. Chris owned it more, was louder in some way about it. And I'm curious what that shift has been, or what that looks like in practice for Chris.
I mean, sometimes it's literally just saying like, this is what I want. Like, and especially in like relationship, being like, this is important to me. This is a line, this is a non-negotiable. And having and learning, I feel like there's a lot of work for me to do in this, to step more and more fully into this, because it's just so radically different than the way that I've created even the best teams in the world that I've created, like some of the most amazing teams, I never stepped fully into this form of leadership. It was always through that spot of consensus. It was always everybody get around the what was it? The Knights of Camelot, right? Or whatever, King Arthur's, round table. Everybody had the same share and voice. And like, I look back now through some relationships that I've had, through some teams that I've led, through one of the things that I'm doing in the Ultimate Coach group with the Being Kids stuff. Like, people are like, Chris, you're the leader. What do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? And it falters because I'm not stepping in and be like, this is the thing that I see that we can do. Right? Like the automation team that I built inside of Boeing. right? If I would have just clearly stepped up and like, no, Josh, you do this, Ben, you do this. I need you guys to do this. Down the road, we'll get to the things that you want to do, but I need you to do this right now. We would have been decades ahead of where I left that group. If I would have, going into the second year of the Ultimate Coach Being Kids group, it's like, this is what I want to do. I'm in creation now with that. And we've kind of just, we've done cool stuff and but now it's like, come January, when everybody comes here in Phoenix and we come through the other side of that, like, we've got some really clear things on what we're going to do now. And it's because it's just like, I hear you guys. I appreciate it. We've taken the feedback, and this is what we got to do. So it's I like the word benevolent. I like that word, right? Stepping away from, I don't know what's a good word for that. Trying to build through consistency. It's been great, but it hasn't been as powerful as it could have been.
Would you say that most of the relationships, like I heard you mention a wide array of relationships there from business to romantic, but the theme that I'm consistently hearing and you speak is compromise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm
always trying to find the compromise. I mean, that's my life, right?
Yeah.
Like my life started with building compromise for my family so that my brother and sister had the most positive experience possible, right? From sleeping on the floor in a closet so that my brother and sister could have their own rooms, right? To like, I mean, that's at 10, right? And the story just continues on all the way up until, a couple months ago.
So you've been able to identify where it started and why you've held that belief for so long.
A piece of it. There's probably more than one ignition points from that. But yeah.
Sure.
I think that there's a difference, though, between compromise and self-denial or self-suppression. Like compromise, might be one of the ingredients in collaboration, that we come to some middle ground. We come to something that actually works for everyone. But what I actually hear in your story, Chris, which is similar to my own, is growing up in a family system where your needs actually had to be suppressed for the good of the others, or that was the perception. I have to suppress my needs or not have any. And what happens from my perspective, what happens for people who have that experience in childhood where they have to either deny, negate, or put aside their needs for others. First of all, that's a beautiful thing. And I think children do that naturally. And when we get to adulthood, what it actually means is we have a very hard time identifying our needs or our wants. And that, in my language, is called self-defining. I know who I am. I know what I want. I know what I wish for. I know what I want to see in the world. I know what love feels like to me and how I want to receive it. And self-defining is an essential aspect to the individual capacity to have a great relationship. Because without that defined self in both people, we really, we don't actually exist inside of the relational system.
I'm curious how one balances that with what I've encountered. It seems like a fact of life with this constant evolution and constant changing. So is it like a constant redefining of self, or like where does that consistency of definition come in, or how important is that?
I mean, I think Jung described it when he talked about individuation as being a lifelong process.
Mm-hmm.
that is a process of discovery that unfolds continuously until we are no more on this mortal coil. I believe that there are entire universes inside of each of us, and we may continue to discover our preferences or our wishes. But I think having a basic sense of self, one that is not necessarily, set in stone, but is somewhat durable, is really important. We really do have to have a sense of who we are, and that unfolds, that develops. Like this year, I decided I wanted to learn how to speak Italian. I've been studying Italian. I never was interested in languages for the, first 50 years of my life.
Yeah.
Like, okay, where did that come from? But it's something that's unfolding. And so that love of language, of the English language, has now shifted and begun to include memorizing Italian poetry. And that, I would never have seen that coming, but that's part of the self-discovery.
So if I hear you correctly, there's almost like pillars or like a foundation of who I am. Like for me, I ask myself, kind of like what Chris has talked about with the document before, of like, for me coming from Hawaii, I understand it, this unconditional love, as aloha. So like, is there aloha in how I'm being right now, or in making that choice? And then another big pillar that I think plays into that too is this inherent connection that I feel to source or to my higher self, and acting from that place. So that's like, those are kind of the pillars of how I define myself and the way I engage with the world, but the way in which that has manifested at various points in life has been totally different.
Yeah. I also think of our ability to self-define as like a GPS. So what I want, what I wish for, what I enjoy, what I need, what I believe, that's an address. And if I can't define that, like that for me, love feels like this, or these are my values. These are the things that, these are the requirements I have in order to be relational with someone. Like in order for someone to be in a relationship with me, these are certain standards that I have. And I think we all get to define that ourselves. Those things that I can say, like, this is what I think, this is what I feel, this is what I believe, those actually give you an address. They are what help someone to find me, or say, yeah, that's not the address I want to go to. So I think that the self-defining is actually what enables us to have very profound intimacy. If we don't have two defined people, so self-defining, which is individuated, and then differentiated, meaning I can vulnerably reveal who I am and hold on to the inevitable tension or anxiety about, if I reveal what I wish for, will you move toward me, or will you move away from me? That process of differentiation is actually what, paradoxically, because love is about paradox, is paradoxically what makes it possible for someone to get very, 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 very close without becoming completely subsumed and enmeshed. So the more defined I am in myself, paradoxically, is the closer you can get to me, while both of us retain our sense of selves. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to switch gears right here. I want to put you on a hot seat, Kristy, since this is your topic. You shared some bullet points, and I want to ask you, I'm going to focus on a few of them right here, right now. The first one is where you said, where women really get it wrong with men, it has everything to do with appreciation. Tell me more. Tell us more.
I think that there is a very concerning trend amongst women, not all women, but a lot of women, and a current narrative about men that makes it very, very easy to denigrate men, to have contempt for men, to resent men, and to judge men. And at a cultural level, something that I think I don't hear women talking about is that men are currently at the lowest level of attainment that they have been educationally and in terms of income for several decades. And as the mother of sons, that concerns me very, very much. And when I observe, because I am an observer of human beings. I've worked with over 7,000 mothers and babies, and I've observed thousands of families, and I've worked with hundreds of clients as a coach and many, many, many couples. And what I observe is we've swung from feminism. Like, I came of age at the height of third wave feminism. I went to a women's college in the 1980s. And we've swung from, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. That was like Gloria Steinem's sort of, feminist mantra. We've swung from that into like really seeing men as lesser than women, less emotionally intelligent, less compassionate. And so we've come into a time I've seen, this is my lens from as a 54-year-old woman, where I think men have really been seen as less emotionally or relationally capable because they may not emote like women or express themselves like women. And in doing that, at the cultural level, there may be some concern, right? Like, certain crimes are like by and large committed by men, and their crimes against women committed by men are horrific. And I do not deny any of that. But at the interpersonal level, what that ends up looking like is women don't really understand what the value of a man is, who a man is, what he is, and how to appreciate his participation in a relational system. I actually am of the mind that I very much, not only do I need men, I very much want men in my world. And I think complementarity is how nature designed us. The body is designed in complementary pairs. Muscles work antagonistically in pairs. When one muscle is short, an antagonistic muscle on the other side is long. But the world and nature was designed to be complementary. And at the level of relationship, though, one of the things that I think a woman can do, should she choose to do, that is like, it is like miracle grow on a relationship, is to find and continuously find ways to appreciate a man for who he is. It is the fastest way for a man to reclaim his worth, if he has not been so inclined to do that work on his own, is for someone to see the greatness in him. And I believe that's a secret power that women can have in relationships with men, is to appreciate them deeply, to see their greatness. I think it fundamentally changes how we see ourselves, any of us, but for men in particular, because I think that they offer something quite uniquely different than women do. And I think we are desperate for it in this culture, for good men. I think we are in the state that we are in because we do not have enough good men who know that they are good and who want to benevolently impose their will in the worlds around them.
So what is that? Do you know what that component that you're talking about appreciating is within the men that people aren't? I'm curious if you can speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak about my own personal journey with it. I've been married to my husband for over 30 years. I grew up in a family without any male figures. My father left when I was 7, and I had really no male figures in my life from that time on. No men took an interest in me. Like, I had no father figures who provided care for me. So I grew up really without any experience of men or the masculine. And what I heard really throughout my, my growing up from a single mother who was, rightly very tired. But what I heard was never rely on a man. You can't trust men. Don't ever rely on a man to provide for you. Don't ever leave yourself vulnerable to a man. And I also heard a lot of contempt toward my own biological father and towards men in general. And so when I first met my husband, I was 23, and we were out at a party one night with his grad student colleagues, and I said something fairly contemptuous about my then boyfriend, now husband, to the hostess. It was supposedly in jest, but it was contempt. I was sort of belittling him. I was making some sort of joke, but it was really at his expense. And she walked away, and my husband turned to me and said, "Don't ever do that again." And I knew exactly what he meant. And I knew exactly where I'd learned how to do that. And I never did it again. But it was the very first time a man had ever expressed to me, "This is actually how you treat me." Because I'd never had any experience with men. I actually was rather afraid of men. And that kind of, I think, very casual disrespect that a lot of women engage in. Like, I can't tell you how many women I've heard talk about their husbands as man-child, or he's just another one of the children. That's incredibly disrespectful. Now, has he earned that? Possibly. I've also seen how some of those men behave. But then that's on her to set the standard, to express, like, this is what's acceptable to me in a relationship.
Right.
Like, that I not, clean up after you or beg you to stop, speeding and road raging. It's definitely a two-way street, but the kind of respect, like, I think we all deserve respect, and appreciation is part of that. Being able to see the good in somebody, that is a real skill. And it's a skill that actually cultivates a relational environment.
What are you hearing, Jay?
What am I hearing?
Yeah.
Christine O'Connell says, "This is a hard and a double-edged sword." Tell me more, Christine O'Connell. And it's good to see you on the show. I hope you are doing well in your own physical recovery and healing of an event that you experienced most recently. Welcome back to Real Men Real Talk Live. What I want to do here is, tonight I'm being a really good active listener. I'm coming off a couple of weeks of what I call a lot of energy expended out from my own self, and so I'm really working on being an active listener tonight and asking the questions. So I'm going to ask the next question, put you on the hot seat one more time. This is coming off of one of your statements or bullets, Kristy, is how do you teach a woman to love you? And listen up, guys, because, hey, there's three of us here and there's one female. So, Kristy, you are the expert in how do you teach a woman to love you as a man? If you're courting a woman, if you're even in a relationship with a woman and things have shifted or changed or they never were. How do you teach women to love you? What is it that we're lacking as men as we're in that courtship, seeking that next relationship?
Well, I mean, it depends so much on the context, right? I mean, context is everything. So it depends on where you're starting. But one of the fundamental ingredients for a good relationship, and it's on both sides, is knowing our self-worth. We have to know our own worth. We have to have self-esteem. We have to really understand that we are worthy of the love that we wish for. And when we know our worth, we then also are likely to be able to ask for, to make requests, to make, to make invitations, but also to make requests for what we wish for. And when we know when we know our worth, it's also that much easier to be able to communicate vulnerably. So I think having a grounded vulnerability, one that's like not based in shame or fear or sort of over expressing. I think vulnerability can simply be allowing someone to see into you, allowing somebody to know what you wish for, knowing what love feels like to you. I think that has been one of the biggest revelations in the 180-degree turn that my marriage took, was learning finally really what love looked like to my husband. Like, he loves when I make food for him. That actually feels like love. He grew up in a family where that was not done for him. So he actually feels deeply cared for when I bake or make things that are sweet for him. Because he actually was not loved by his own mother in particularly nurturing ways. He also loves to have me put my hand on his face. And those kinds of things, those are really tender. They're really vulnerable. But when we can convey to somebody, this is what love feels like to me, that's an invitation. It can't be a command. It has to be an invitation. But we also have to have, and this comes also out of self-worth, we have to have clear relational standards. We get to teach people how to behave with us. We get to teach people what is relational to us. Like, one of my husband's hard no's is contempt. Eye rolling, disgust, which is something that a lot of people do. These micro expressions of contempt, that is a hard no for him. Like if that exists in our relationship, I am not going to be in the relationship. And that ability to honor our own boundaries, like, this is my boundary. A boundary is something that enables me to get close to you while loving myself. Those are the ways that I believe we all can, but especially men, teach people how to love us. And when we do that from a place that's loving, that is not punitive, but it's like, hey, if you want to be in my world, this is what, these are some of the ways that works for me. When we can do that in a way that's loving and it comes from self-worth, it actually can feel deeply good to the person receiving that information. Like, oh, this is how I can convey my love to you. Because love is not just a feeling. The feeling is the result of the action. So a man who can tell someone, this is what feels like love to me, this is what I need, this is what I wish for, we're back to self-defining, and he does that from a place of self-worth, I believe that's a man who teaches a woman how to love him.
Chris Morrison, what'd you hear in that?
What came up for me is the question of finding that worth, right? Like, how, some of the things I can think of, you were talking about, your husband likes to have a hand placed on his face, and somebody placing, their hand on my heart, that's a deeply connecting thing for me, right? And so I think I can name a thing or two, but I would love to hear if you have any practices, or what does that exploration process look like for a man to step into? These is the things. I mean, we can all read the books and stuff like that. We know love languages and all the things, and it starts maybe the possibility, right? It starts a possibility, but I find also that they are somewhat lacking in, it's good lip service, but it's not like this is how to connect with the non-negotiables, the things that are, or the things that are, must-haves. So I'd love to hear any thoughts that come across from that.
Carmela, you got something up?
Well, I have almost like another piece that I'm curious about with that question, which is like, do we have to experience what we don't want in order to identify what it is?
You and I are on the same wavelength.
Do
Because
that.
as Chris was talking, I was thinking, so much of what I've experienced in terms of realizing, oh, this feels like love to me, or, oh, this is what works for me, is by encountering what didn't feel great, or realizing, oh, that thing, like a couple weeks, I'll give you a little example, and I love to tell stories, and I'll probably tell 10 stories to make one point, but I'm very feminine in that way. I'll go all the way around the barn. A couple weeks ago, my husband and I were at the gym, and we were leaving the gym. We go and lift weights 3 times a week, and we were leaving the gym one day, and I was saying, there was this guy got really angry at me because I took a weight from a station that he had left. So I thought he was done. And I put it on my stack, and he comes back and is really rude. Like, did you take that and give it back? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought you were done. And I was telling my husband this story, and he's driving us back home, and I'm describing this, and he says, don't ever apologize to a man for that. And I was like, oh. He's like, yeah, that's not something you apologize for. If he left and it looked like he was gone, you just tell him you left. I was like, oh, I didn't get this kind of masculine protection growing up. So that actually felt like love to me. And it wasn't until like a day or two later, and I was like, I actually felt really loved when you did that. I felt like, oh, someone's like watching out for me. And that then helped me to articulate, when you protect me, like that felt like protection. And that's not actually how my husband would necessarily think, oh, I'm protecting you by teaching you how to basically not let a man be a jerk to you in the gym. And by me then saying, actually, that felt protective. I actually felt cared for. I felt protected. That started to get him to think of like, oh, how do I protect her? Are there ways that she needs protection that I haven't thought of? So you can see like our relationship actually can start to inform like, what are the ways that I like to be loved and want to be loved? And I think we come to that both through like positive experiences like that and through negative experiences. Like we can feel like something is missing. And the art is to be able to say, what I really wished for in that moment was, that you had stepped forward, or, that you had protected me in this way, that it looked like this action. And I really do believe we do teach one another how to love us, but I also believe that we learn to love, that is something that we all have the capacity for. And the way that we learn to love well is by loving poorly. I don't think that there's another way to get there.
By loving poorly? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like any activity or instrument, it's not going to sound so great the first time you play it.
Yeah. I mean, but I think one of the things is like, when it comes to love, even like doing it poorly is often is enough of a start. Like we don't have to do it perfectly for it to work. And if we want to, we can get better at it.
I got a question for you, Kristy. What is your relationship with, we talk about compromise in a relationship, and we talk about relationships are hard. Do you believe that either one of those statements are true? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
So I will say I don't actually believe relationships have to be hard. However, if I picked up the violin right now, it would be very hard. I have only touched a violin a couple times in my life. I don't really know what to do with it. I have spent many, many years actually in both deliberate practice and deliberate study to love well. And I've chosen one person in this lifetime to love. So I have made myself an expert in a Jason. And that is my chosen, my chosen sort of area of study in the realm of love is this one human being. And I think that we can look at it as hard, or we can look at that's life on life's terms, is we will always need to grow. And very often when people talk about something being hard, and this might sound hard itself, but I actually mean this very lovingly, that to me is often the sign of being victimized by our own need to grow. And growth is a requirement. We grow or we die. We don't actually have an alternative. Now, emotionally in a marriage, what dying looks like is stagnation and disconnection. So we are either growing in a long-term relationship or a marriage, or we are stagnating, and that stagnation becomes like a loss of passion, a loss of eros, a loss of emotional aliveness and connection. So I prefer not to take the stance that it's hard. I think that life is going to present us with challenges, and we can either look at those as ways that we're going to grow or not. I think it's a choice.
What do you make of that, Chris Morrison? What's on your mind right here, right?
Well, I was just reading through. I always have my document and my values within hand's reach, either on my phone or a piece of paper that I carry. And personal growth, right? And I like that alignment with relationships don't have to be hard, but they need to grow. I like that a lot. That really just kind of sunk in for me. That's really kind of like, because that is the story that we hear so often. And growth can be very uncomfortable, right? The exchange that we shared was really uncomfortable for a long time, and it's still sometimes very uncomfortable. But the growth that is coming out of that, the version of myself that I get to meet through that conversation, super important, amazing, fun to meet that person. Partner just yesterday, like I was on the phone and I was not being nice to the lady from the insurance company that screwed up my insurance. And now I can't go do the knee thing that I needed to do and had all these plans to get done. And I was not nice. She's like, there's no reason for that. You were being present. You were being agitated. Right? And have somebody, for her to have the courage to say that to me. And she's like, and you get agitated and you show up that way for your boys sometimes too. Right? Like, let's look at where's your bandwidth short so that you're not being present. And so, right, instead of getting defensive and mean and sad or mad, it was a little sad for sure to hear that, but to lean back into that value. This is a growth place, right? I've moved from being violent as a young person to angry in the words that I speak to now, how am I going to completely remove that feeling of agitation, out of myself, and so that I'm not expressing into the world. So that's just what kind of dropped in that moment. The other thing is something that I'm really, really strong on is don't look for what you don't want. Look for what you want, right? And so when Kristy was starting to, so when we were starting to have this conversation about how do we know what we want in our relationship, we a lot of times we can say what we don't like, right? I don't like it when people do this. I don't like it when people do that. But to say it as that, to use that as the compass, is I don't want this, right? I don't want somebody that's just like my mom. How many people end up marrying somebody that's just like their mom when they're searching for somebody that's not like their mom? You have to come back into that positive affirmation of, I want somebody who can follow through on what they say. I want somebody who can, give me space when I come home so that I can feel at peace and pick up after themselves, so I don't have to walk around behind them and pick up after them. I want somebody who's clean and tidy, right? And so just something I'm very passionate about. Chris Smith really talks about that well. And when he first said that, I was like, that right there, I'm going to hold very, very dearly to me. So it's good to know those things. I think it's good to understand these are my non-negotiables. I don't want to feel these ways, but gotta turn that. You have to turn that into what's the positive affirmation of that experience.
I'm curious, what role do boundaries play in deeply satisfying relationships? And why are so many people uncomfortable setting a boundary in a relationship of intimacy?
I mean, that second part of that question is so huge. I think that the two most fundamental aspects of a good relationship are that each person has healthy self-esteem, and I hear a little one. That each person has healthy self-esteem, and that both people understand and feel entitled, a healthy entitlement to boundaries. Not walled off, not boundaryless, neither grandiose and entitled nor shame-filled. Terry Real, who's one of my teachers, talks about those two coordinates, is having healthy boundaries and having healthy self-esteem. And if we lack self-esteem, it will be very hard to set boundaries. If we actually are sort of on the other end of the spectrum and we feel entitlement or grandiosity, we actually will also not be great with boundaries, because when we are entitled and we feel better than other people, we will absolutely encroach upon people's space and take advantage of people and maybe not even see them. But I think fundamentally, in the most simplistic terms, I think when we grow up in relational systems where there's a lack of attunement, which in my definition is loving, responsive presence. There's a lack of attunement. There's a lack of self-defining, because when we are self-defined, when we know who we are, what we believe and what we feel, we tend to also be able to tolerate somebody else being self-defined. So I'm a self, you're a self. I have these thoughts and feelings. You have those thoughts and feelings. And sometimes we're going to be, how I describe it with my clients is, sometimes we're going to think and feel the same. It's going to be very similar. We're going to be here. But sometimes we're going to think and feel very differently, and we're going to be in different places. The ability to tolerate that, Chris and I might be like this on one subject, but like this on another, on like this when it comes to, you know, how often we want to have sex, or like this and how often we want to have sex, that those things in a long-term committed relationship, the ability to navigate those and requires boundaries, but it has everything to do with how we navigate difference, which is essentially how we navigate conflict. And conflict is actually really scary to people. Conflict has the appearance, because to our brain, our primitive brain, the amygdala and the limbic system, conflict, depending on our early experiences in childhood, conflict can actually mean a loss of connection. And so people will actually cultivate adaptations to that fear of loss of connection when there's some kind of difference. I'm having this feeling, you're having that feeling, they're not the same. And therefore either be too boundaried, like walled off, you know, like not able to express emotions or feelings or let someone know how you're thinking and feeling, or no boundaries, like just like unbridling like your emotions all over somebody, or making assumptions. Mm-hmm. So I think it's complex. I think that it's nuanced, but ultimately it comes down to both our sense of self, having a distinct sense of self, and the self-worth that comes from the experience of learning in relationship, because we actually have to develop a sense of self. In our self concept is developed in relationship. It continues to be developed in relationship across our lifetime. And depending on who we're in relationship with, you know, that can impact our self-concept. So we are the stewards of that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I do want to let you all know that we're coming up on the hour. We got about 3.5 minutes to the hour. I want to try to keep it as close to that hour as possible. So I want to invite each one of you, give you a minute or two max, to share from your own life experiences. If you've been there, what is the number one thing that you have experienced that you can do to have an amazing relationship that will have access, that we have access to? Go ahead, Kai.
I think it's kind of been alluded and spoken to a lot tonight. That's sovereignty in a relationship.
Tell me more. What does that mean to you?
It means coming in as a whole person. You know, there's this term in English of like my other half. And I think that programming is so detrimental because it gives us this false idea that we're not whole and we're not complete without the other. And like Kristy shared, you know, we are complementary. We physically and energetically are complementary, but it doesn't require that I need the other in order to know, to be self-defined. And I think being able to come in, being open to receive love and have people fulfill the needs that I need in a relationship is very different from someone else giving me my own self needs to feel okay and here. And I've only had one major relationship, committed relationship in this life so far, and it wasn't based on that. And I've taken a pause for a little over a year now to really hone in on like self-sovereignty. I think to also be able to find that person who can meet me there.
Beautiful. Chris, what's the number one thing that you have experienced, if you have, in a relationship that can make the relationship amazing, that we all have access to? What would that be for you? Hold on, I gotta unmute you. I'll unmute you. Can you unmute yourself?
Oh, I got it.
There it is.
I got it. Yeah, no, it's very similar, right? I am worthy, right? And right, like I can only what I've seen so far is I can only be loved to the level that I love myself. And so something that I'm working with is I am loving, fully open to giving and receiving love in abundance. That's something that I've recently put into my document, and it's just like, the more I can love myself, the more I can be happy with myself, the more I can say, like, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, and I am confident that I am a good man. I am confident that I am a good father. I'm confident that I can be a good partner. And even though like that, some of those, there's a little bit of dissidence there sometimes. One of a great conversation I had just today was just like, and I can forgive myself for the times that I'm not. And so, yeah, it's that very similar thing. Just knowing that I am worth receiving and giving love.
How does it feel to hear yourself say that right now, Chris Morrison? Are you able to see what you said right here?
Say that again, Chad. I want
you
to be able to sit and receive that in a way that I can actually
really receive what you just communicated or conveyed?
Sorry, it's still missed. We talked over each other, but how do I receive that?
Yeah. Are you able to receive what you just shared about yourself here? Because sometimes we speak words, but it doesn't mean that we are connected to the words.
Most times, a good amount of the time, yes, I can.
Beautiful.
And sometimes absolutely not. And those are the spots where I need to sit and forgive myself. Be like, you know what? Today I wasn't as good a father as I strive to be. And that's okay. I'm human. I wasn't the best partner today. And that's okay. And work through that forgiveness.
That's accountability right there, right, Chris?
Yeah.
And that's something that so many of us lack in our relationships is we do this. We point the finger. We talk about what you've done. But how often do we not take accountability in our own choices? And you've heard me say this before, it's simple, not easy. To take accountability is part of owning your behaviors. And when you're called out on it or when you're asked about it, you either defend the offense or we take accountability. And that's where we get to grow up. Kristy, it's your turn. What's the number one thing that anyone, including yourself, can do to have an amazing relationship that we all have access to?
For me, the single most important thing that any one of us can do is cultivate our capacity to deliberately aim our attention on anything. I believe that our attention is the greatest currency that we will ever possess. And it is also the quality that connects us to consciousness with a capital C. So attention is a form of awareness, and awareness is consciousness, and consciousness, our conscious presence evokes the presence of consciousness. And that our ability to be deliberate with how we place our attention, to think about what we think about, to think about how we think, to be clear about what we're attending to and what our thoughts are, what predominates in our thoughts. Really, the nature of meditation, for instance, is really to become familiar with the mind. A relationship can be a meditation on love. And when we become clear and deliberate about the way we use our attention, including our ability to place our attention both inside and outside, on ourselves and on someone else, on the present moment as it's arising between us, on the sensations in my body and what I'm perceiving in the other person's experience, the quality of our attention in my world determines the quality of our relationships. And that is something anyone can cultivate and become very skillful in. If you can tie your shoes, if you can make dinner, you can cultivate your attention.
We've gone over a little bit, and I've had a couple of requests to, it's okay for us to go over tonight. So I want to honor your time, both Chris and Kristy. If you've got a little bit more time, I got a few more questions to run by you. Are you both Kamala as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
If I'm probably actually need to run. I've got the littles downstairs, so but I'm good at just saying I love you and you guys carrying on, and I can actually watch for a couple seconds. So
I'll throw this out as another idea too. I think it could be really cool to continue this conversation in another episode.
Part 2.
Yeah, because I have so many questions too. Like even an extra 10 minutes, I don't feel like is gonna take later.
Yeah, and Chris, from where I'm sitting, it wouldn't be the same without you.
I agree.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So what we'll do is we'll set part 2. The timing is going to be challenging because Kamala is actually heading back to the islands next Wednesday, I believe. If my
Tuesday, I'll be back on Wednesday. So if I can borrow my dad or someone else's laptop,
figure it out. So let's shoot for next Wednesday if we can. Maybe you can communicate that. But before we go, real quick, I did not answer the question myself as far as the number one thing that anyone can do to have amazing relationships. And what's interesting is I didn't always have amazing relationships in my life. And if we're just talking about singular relationships, it's one thing, but it's all my relationships in life. For me, it's about how do I show up? Am I showing up with smoke and mirrors, or do I feel comfortable enough with who I've become in my own adulthood to share vulnerability, authenticity, my truths? And as far as it relates to a relationship with a partner in life, it's interesting. I asked this question to many couples that pass through our home because my partner in life is a private chef, and we get a lot of strangers that pass through that have 25, 35, 40 plus years of marriage. And it's so interesting. The answer that I get is very consistently the same, which we touched on tonight. A few of them is, 50-50. I give 50, she gives 50, things of that nature. And I'm not in agreement with that personally. I think I give 100%, and it's up to my partner to give 100% of what we're capable of giving based on where we're at in our own life journey. That's number one. The second thing is learning how to feel safe to show up as my authentic self and express all my feelings that I didn't have access to for decades as a man in my life, until I hit my own, what I call rock bottom, at age 54 back in 2015. I'd also would share that it's about honoring and respecting one another. And for me, it was always about, in this relationship, always, number one love language that I've shared is words of affirmation, because it's hard for me not to. When I see what I see and when I feel what I feel, I'm not going to hold it back. So I express it. And the last few words I want to share about how to have an amazing relationship is to really honor and respect one another. It's not about questioning one another. It's about seeing one another an understanding that we came from different backgrounds, different belief systems that were infused or programmed into us here and here. And being able to witness and see our partner right where they're at, understanding that part of how they show up is based on their past, and being patient with their journey, but still honoring, respecting them, and encouraging them to tap into their infinite possibilities that we all have. Many of us never experience that. What are our possibilities in life? And we all have infinite possibilities. But to embrace that, it takes a shift in our mindset. It takes some type of awakening, perhaps. But ultimately, that's what worked for me for many years in this relationship. Now there's a shift that's in play right now. And at times it can be confusing. Most times it can be confusing. But part of this journey is embracing trust and faith in our own process of expansion. And that is anything but simple or easy. It takes courage, it takes truth, but it also takes compassion, self-compassion, but also compassion from your partner. That we come from different sides of the hood, if I may refer to it that way. And so, yeah, that's my short version. I want to take a moment here, unless anyone has a quick comment they want to just expand upon very briefly to what I just shared. Otherwise, we'll pick it all up on part 2.
I just want to make sure that one thing that people like, how do people reach out to you, Kristy, if if this resonates, like I know that just being in presence with you is shifted for me, and if how can people if this is something that they're interested in.
Thank you. Yes, I work with women and couples, and you can find my very sizzling writing about all things relationships and women on Facebook. and I love to talk to people in my DMs. So you can friend me on Facebook, follow me, or message me there.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And on that note, viewers, I want to just take a moment here to thank each one of you that pick us up on live or on replay. If tonight's topic and show resonated with you on any level, we do encourage you and invite you to share it out with your own friends and family through social media, and also pick it up and send it on an email or a text. And our channel where we archive all 199 episodes is on our YouTube channel at Real Men Real Talk Live. After YouTube, just search on YouTube and you'll find us there. And again, thank you, Kristy Scher, for joining us this evening. Thank you, Kamalu, for your last week in Sedona as you head back home to your homeland on the island. And Chris Morrison, as always, congratulations. It sounds like a congratulations is in order for you made some progress this week with the courts with your sons. And all I can say is
thank you.
Let's all just keep showing up as our authentic selves and see where this takes us in our life. And with that, I love each one of you. Peace and blessings. If you have a moment to stay in the studio thereafter, please do, Kristy, just for a moment, so we could have a quick wrap up. But in the meantime, viewers, one more time, thank you for joining us all on Real Men, Real Talk, Live!